It started with a dusty box in the attic. James Holloway hadn't been up there in years, maybe since before Carol passed. The steps creaked under his weight, just like they always had in this old Michigan farmhouse, the same one he'd been born in, the same one he planned to die in. He was 70 now, and though his hands still worked with the steadiness of an old mechanic, his heart sometimes felt older than the house itself. The attic was dim, filled with the scent of aged wood, mothballs, and forgotten years. He was looking for a picture, one he promised his granddaughter, Emma, from back when he served in Vietnam. Instead, he found the box. Small, brown, taped shut with that yellowed Scotch tape that only old things seem to have. Scribbled on the top in Carol's handwriting were the words, "Jay's stuff, old phone." He chuckled under his breath. "Old phone," he muttered. "What the hell is in here?" Inside were receipts, old keys, and a flip phone, one of those gray bricks from the early 2000s. Out of habit, he plugged it in using a charger from the drawer downstairs. The screen lit up slowly, showing a blinking light. One new voicemail. Dated November 3rd, 2005. Unknown number. He stared at it for a long while, the blinking icon pulsing like a heartbeat. Something about it made his chest tighten. His finger hovered over the play button. And then, he pressed it. There was static at first, low, crackling static, like an old radio trying to find its frequency. Then a voice. "James, it's me. I don't even know if this number still works. I've tried to call before but never left a message. Maybe I was too scared, or maybe I thought you'd just erase it anyway. But I had to try. Just once." James froze. The voice was soft, uncertain. Familiar. "I know it's been a long time. 20 years, almost. Can you believe that? I still remember the way you used to laugh in the truck after those long drives home from the plant, like nothing in the world could touch us. But it did, didn't it?" The static returned for a beat, then faded. I'm not calling to ask for anything. Just wanted to say, I never stopped thinking about you. About that last day. What I said. What I didn't say. Maybe you hated me after that, maybe you still do. But I needed to say I'm sorry. I was wrong. So wrong." James sat back slowly in the kitchen chair, phone still pressed to his ear. The walls around him seemed to blur. He knew that voice. He hadn't heard it in decades. Angela. The name landed like a stone in his chest. His brother's wife. Angela Miller. Back in 1983, she married Tom, James's younger brother by 4 years. Tom was the wild one. Charming, fast-talking, the kind of man people either admired or avoided. James had always been the steadier one, quiet, measured. A fixer of engines, not hearts. But then Angela came along. She was unlike anyone James had ever met. Bright eyes, sharp wit, a heart that seemed too big for a small town like Elk Ridge. When she and Tom started dating, James swallowed his feelings like rusted nails. It was one of those cruel tricks life plays, falling in love with someone who's meant for someone else. He'd never acted on it. Not once. But over the years, those quiet glances across dinner tables, those late-night porch talks when Tom was out drinking, there was a connection. A gravity either of them admitted, until one night. That night. The one that tore everything apart. Angela's voice on the voicemail pulled him back from memory. I never got to explain. I never had the courage. After what happened, after Tom. James stood, suddenly restless. He paced the kitchen floor, passing old photos on the wall, smiling faces now just memories on fading paper. Angela. After all this time. After 2 decades of silence. What could she want now? And why now? Elk Ridge hadn't changed much over the years. There were a few new storefronts downtown, some boutique candle place where the old barbershop used to be. The high school football field now had metal bleachers instead of the splintery wooden ones James used to sit on with Carol. But the people were mostly the same. Same last names. Same tired smiles. Same ghosts. After hearing Angela's voice, James didn't sleep that night. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles above him, the old voicemail echoing over and over in his mind. The next morning, he went to the local cafe, the only place that still brewed coffee the way he liked it, burnt and bitter. "Morning, James," came a familiar voice. Linda Prescott. They'd gone to school together back in the 60s. She poured his coffee before he even sat down. "Morning, Lynn. You look like you seen a ghost." James just gave her a tired smile. Maybe he had. He thought about asking if anyone had heard from Angela over the years. But in Elk Ridge, asking questions was as good as starting rumors. And he wasn't ready for that yet. He sipped his coffee, staring out the window at the sleepy town he'd never left. Some ghosts weren't just in memories. Some came back with a voice, 20 years late. James didn't talk about Tom much anymore. The town remembered him in bits and pieces. Some recalled the high school quarterback who once threw 5 touchdowns in the state's semis. Others remembered the drinking, the bar fights, the temper. For James, it was more complicated. Tom had been his kid brother, sure, but also a storm that never settled. After Vietnam, James came home quieter, older somehow. Tom came back angrier. Something in him never uncoiled. He drank more, gambled more. Angela held it together for as long as she could. But the last year, it got bad. James could still see that night like it was burned behind his eyes. A stormy March evening in '05. Tom showed up at his place, drunk, slurring, fists clenched. Said Angela had left him. Accused James of knowing more than he let on. Accused him of being the reason she left. There'd been yelling. Shoving. Then headlights disappeared down the dirt road. Tom wrapped his truck around a tree 2 hours later. Died on impact. The sheriff called it an accident. But the guilt, the weight, never left James. Not for a single day. And now Angela's voice, after all this time, came like an aftershock from a quake he thought had ended long ago. Why now? What had she been trying to say? The next morning, James found another voicemail. This time, Angela's voice was clearer, less hesitant. "James, it's me again. I didn't leave this before because I didn't know how. But I need you to understand something. Tom wasn't the man you remember. He was broken. And I was scared. I left to protect myself, and to give us all a chance to heal." Her words felt like shards of glass, cutting through years of silence. "I wasn't just scared of him," she continued softly. "I was scared of what might happen if I stayed. But leaving didn't mean I stopped caring. I thought if I vanished, it might make things easier for everyone." James pressed pause, his throat tight. The woman who had once been the source of so much pain was now speaking in a voice full of remorse and vulnerability. "I never meant to hurt you or your family. I didn't know how to do anything else. Please, if you're listening, know that I'm sorry. I hope someday you can forgive me." The message ended, but the silence in the room was deafening. James sat back, overwhelmed by the flood of feelings, anger, regret, longing, and a strange flicker of hope. Maybe this was a second chance. That afternoon, James decided to walk. The late autumn air was crisp, smelling of fallen leaves and the faint hint of wood smoke from neighbors' chimneys. The streets of Elk Ridge were quiet, kids back in school, adults working their day jobs, and elderly folks settling into the slow rhythm of retirement. He passed the old playground where he and Tom had once wrestled under the big oak tree. The swings creaked softly in the wind, empty now. James's fingers brushed against the rough bark as he remembered a summer afternoon in '68, when Tom had scraped his knee, and Angela, just a teenager then, had run over with a bandage and a shy smile. It felt like a lifetime ago. James's thoughts drifted to Carol, his late wife, who had been his anchor through so much. He could still hear her gentle voice urging him to forgive, to find peace. Walking deeper into town, James found himself outside the abandoned Miller house, Angela's childhood home. The windows were boarded up, paint peeling. Yet somehow, it still held a presence, like the echo of a story unfinished. He realized this voicemail wasn't just a message. It was a key, Maybe the first step to unlock a door he'd slammed shut years ago. That evening, James sat by the phone, the receiver heavy in his hand. For years, he'd avoided calling Angela. After Tom's death, their last conversation had been a bitter storm of words either could take back. But now, with the voicemail playing over and over in his mind, something inside him shifted. His thumb hovered over the keypad. Would she even answer? Would she want to talk? Could forgiveness really begin over a phone line? He took a deep breath and dialed. The line rang twice before a familiar voice, older, softer, answered. Hello? Angela, it's James. There was a pause, and then a breathy laugh, half surprise, half relief. James, I didn't think you'd call. Neither did he. I listened to your message, James said quietly. I want to understand. Maybe it's time we talked. For Tom's sake. For our own. I'd like that, she said. And in that moment, across the miles and years, two broken pieces of a past began to reach toward each other. Their first conversation was slow, cautious, like two old hands trying to fit puzzle pieces back together after years of being lost. Angela spoke softly, her voice carrying the weight of decades spent in silence. Tom wasn't always like that, James. He was good once. A brother. A husband. But the war, it broke something in him. Not just Vietnam, before that too. His father, his childhood, there were scars I didn't know how to see. James listened, the memories colliding with what he thought he knew. The man he loved and hated was far more complicated than any story he told himself. Angela told him about nights spent worrying, about the fights she tried to stop, and the final desperate night when she left. I never stopped hoping you'd understand. I wanted to protect you both. But I wasn't strong enough. James closed his eyes and let the tears come. For Tom. For Angela. For all the years stolen by silence and misunderstanding. Sometimes, the hardest battles aren't fought on the battlefield, they're fought inside us. The weeks that followed their calls became a fragile bridge between two distant souls. James found himself looking forward to their conversations, sometimes long, sometimes quiet, but always honest. Angela shared stories he'd never heard, like Tom's childhood dreams of becoming a pilot, the letters he wrote but never sent, the good moments buried beneath the pain. For the first time in decades, James allowed himself to remember the laughter too. One evening, Angela said softly, I'm coming to Elk Ridge next week. If you want, we can meet. No pressure. Just closure. James hesitated. Part of him feared reopening wounds. But a stronger part, a part shaped by Carol's gentle wisdom, pushed him forward. Okay, he said. Let's do that. He hung up feeling lighter, like a weight had lifted. Maybe, just maybe, this was the second chance life had been offering all along. The day Angela arrived, Elk Ridge felt almost suspended in time. James waited outside the little train station, a nervous knot tightening in his chest. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, colors that reminded him of sunsets shared with Carol years ago. When Angela stepped off the train, her hair streaked with silver and eyes still bright with the same fire, James felt a flood of memories crash over him. James, she said quietly, voice trembling. He nodded, words caught in his throat. They walked slowly down Main Street, past the old diner where Tom had once worked, and the church where Angela had gotten married. Neither spoke much at first. Sometimes the silence said more than words ever could. Finally, Angela stopped near the riverbank, where the water shimmered under the moonlight. I'm sorry for everything, she whispered. For the pain, the silence. For leaving you alone with it all. James looked at her, seeing not just the past, but the woman standing there, a woman who'd carried her own burdens for 20 years. It's not just on you, he said. We all made mistakes. But maybe now, we can start to forgive. And in that quiet moment, two old souls found a fragile peace. After their meeting by the river, Angela and James slowly began to rebuild a connection that neither had dared to imagine was possible after so many years. They started meeting for coffee at the diner, sharing memories and stories about Tom, not the man he had become, but the boy he once was. Angela talked about her struggles after leaving Elk Ridge, how she moved from town to town, trying to outrun her past. James spoke about Carol, the love of his life, and the family they built despite all the hardships. One afternoon, Linda Prescott stopped by their table with an knowing smile. "You two look like old friends catching up," she said teasingly. James chuckled. "More like two people trying to find their way back home." Angela smiled softly. "Sometimes second chances don't come in big gestures. Sometimes they come in quiet moments, one day at a time." And Elk Ridge, with its slow pace and familiar faces, seemed to offer them the perfect place to heal. Despite the slow thaw between them, James often found himself wrestling with a deep, gnawing loneliness. Carol's absence was a quiet ache in every room of the house, especially at night when the shadows seemed to grow longer, and the silence became overwhelming. He thought about the friends he'd lost to time, neighbors moving away, old buddies from the plant who had passed on. The world he knew was shrinking. One evening, after a particularly quiet day, James confided in Angela during a phone call. "I don't know if I ever got over feeling alone," he said, voice rough. "It's not just about losing Tom or Carol. It's like I'm the last one standing sometimes." Angela's voice softened. "You're not alone, James. We all carry our loneliness, but that doesn't mean we have to carry it alone." Their conversations grew deeper, touching on the fears of aging, the reality of facing the final chapters of life without the people who mattered most. In the shared understanding between two kindred spirits, James began to feel less isolated and more hopeful. One chilly morning, as frost clung to the bare branches lining Elk Ridge's streets, James noticed a flyer pinned to the community board at the post office. "Volunteer helpers needed for seniors." Something stirred inside him. Maybe it was the loneliness, or the memory of Carol's endless generosity. Whatever it was, James signed up that very afternoon. He found himself visiting neighbors, mostly widows and widowers who, like him, battled the quiet struggles of aging. He helped Mrs. Jenkins with her garden, fixed old Mr. Wallace's squeaky door, and even delivered homemade soup to the Andersons, whose son was deployed overseas. Angela joined him sometimes, her smile brightening the dim afternoons. These small acts of kindness created ripples. The community began to gather again, not just out of necessity, but out of genuine care. James realized that in giving, he found a part of himself that had been missing, a purpose beyond grief, a connection beyond pain. One evening, as James was locking up the community center after a volunteer meeting, a young man approached him nervously. "Mr. Holloway? Hi, I'm Jake Wilson. I just wanted to thank you for helping my grandma." James smiled. "You're welcome, Jake. She's a tough lady." Jake hesitated, then spoke softly. "I wanted to tell you something. A few weeks ago, my dad, he finally got out of prison. He's trying to turn his life around, but things haven't been easy." James listened, nodding slowly. Jake continued. "My dad used to be like your brother, I guess. Lost and angry. But he's working hard to make things right. I think your kindness gave my family hope." James felt a lump rise in his throat. It was the kind of justice life sometimes hands out quietly, not in headlines or courtrooms, but in small moments where good ripples out. "Karma's a funny thing," James said, voice low. "Sometimes it catches up in ways you don't expect." Jake smiled and walked away, leaving James with a renewed sense that even broken lives could find their way back. One afternoon, a weathered envelope arrived in James's mailbox, the handwriting unmistakably Angela's. He carefully opened it, fingers trembling slightly, and unfolded a letter filled with words that reached across time. "Dear James, there are things I never said, things I've carried alone for too long. Tom was lost before he even left Elk Ridge. The war only made it worse. I left because I was afraid, not because I didn't love him, or you. I hope you can understand that now. I'm sorry for the pain, the silence, the years we wasted. If you're willing, I want to help heal what's left broken. Angela." James read the letter twice, then folded it carefully. The past was still tangled and raw, but for the first time, it felt like a thread he could follow toward forgiveness and peace. Angela and James decided to hold a small family dinner, inviting Emma and a few close friends from Elk Ridge. The evening was quiet at first, old stories mingled with tentative smiles and occasional silences heavy with unspoken emotions. Emma watched her grandfather closely, sensing the weight this night carried. As the meal progressed, James raised his glass. To family. To second chances. To the people we lost and the ones who keep us going. Angela nodded, eyes glistening. And to forgiveness, the hardest gift we can give. The room filled with soft laughter and shared memories, the past finally weaving itself into the present in a way that felt whole. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real. That night, after everyone left, James sat by the fireplace alone. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows that seemed to breathe with the memories of the past. He thought about Carol's gentle laugh, Tom's wild spirit, and Angela's courage to reach out after all these years. Life had been messy, painful, and unpredictable, but it was also filled with moments of grace. James pulled out the old flip phone once more and listened to Angela's voicemail again. This time, it didn't sting or reopen old wounds. It felt like a bridge, a connection across time, a whisper of hope. He whispered softly, "Thank you?" For the first time in a long time, James felt peace. Weeks later, just as summer began to bloom in Elk Ridge, James received one final voicemail from Angela. Her voice was calm, steady, older but filled with warmth. "James, I just wanted to say thank you. For listening. For forgiving. For giving me a chance to make things right. I'm planning to stay in Elk Ridge for a while. Maybe it's time we stop running from the past and start building something new. Together." James smiled, feeling the weight of those words settle deep in his chest. It wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about the future, however uncertain, however fragile. And for the first time, that future felt possible. Years later, James stood at the edge of Elk Ridge's riverbank, the same spot where he and Angela had met that first night. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant memories. Around him, the town moved forward, children laughing, neighbors chatting, life quietly unfolding. He held his phone in his hand, the voicemail from 20 years ago still saved, a fragile thread connecting past to present. James had learned that life isn't about perfect endings. It's about the courage to face the wounds we carry, the strength to forgive, and the grace to welcome second chances. In the twilight of his years, he had found peace, not by erasing the past, but by embracing it with kindness. He smiled softly, feeling the presence of those he loved, Tom, Carol, Angela, all part of the story he was still living. Sometimes, a voice lost in time can be the light that guides you home. And for James Holloway, that light was finally shining bright.